Good morning to everybody who is joining us live. For those who are watching this recording, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I'm looking forward to it. We've got Adrian and Paul Gardiner with us. These are legendary surnames within the industry, and I'm greatly looking forward to today's conversation. Before we get into it with them, just a reminder that a part of my inspiration for doing this, I used to watch Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach and loved that series. And then when I got into the travel and tourism industry, I'd start to go to five-star lodges. And really, I was just fascinated not only by their luxury, but who they attracted to our country, the who's who of the world coming in. And then as time went on, I started to get fascinated by the people behind these brands and realizing what an impact they had on the good news in South Africa, Southern Africa, on the African continent. And I got really intrigued. I tried to launch a television series featuring the owners. I tried to take it to Netflix, and life happened, but we're here on YouTube, and I'm getting to talk to some of the people that I really, really want to speak to. And I'm excited to chat to Adrian and Paul today. Gents, welcome to the interview today.
Morning, Ron.
Morning, Ron. Thank you for including us.
It's a great pleasure. I will kick straight off with a question, Adrian. Where did it all begin? I know that is a big question. It's a very broad one. We think of you, we think of a friend, we think of Shamwari. Where did it all start for you?
Well, that's a good start to say, where did it all begin? Because at the entrance to our lodge, next to Shamwari, we have traversing rights over Shamwari. Right at the gate there, it says where it all began. So that was a good intro. But just to quickly give you a background is that I basically grew up in Zimbabwe. My father was involved in a cattle ranching business, which was owned by an overseas company. And one of the farms, it was cattle mainly, one of the farms was 365,000 acres or 150,000 hectares, which had its own private game reserve. And he used to manage these when the managers went on leave and we as kids would go there. So I think wildlife grew up in my blood through my bringing up in Zimbabwe and being associated with incredible wildlife there. Then I went to the university in Cape Town in 1961 and did a BCom degree there. And I was one of those clever students who took 7 years to do a 3-year degree. So because I'd been at boarding school in Zimbabwe, where my dad started the school called Falcon College, and when I got to Cape Town, I realized there was something else besides studying called Wine, Woman, and Song. But after 4 years of doing the degree, I suddenly woke up and realized that to let an academic thing beat me was ridiculous. So I quickly went back at night and finished it off at night. And I think I learned a lot then while everybody else was enjoying life, I was studying. But then my first job was with SPAR. They were quite new in this country. It was a franchise from Holland, and we were at the central office in Cape Town. And then I left there. My marketing lecturer, who I got on well with at Cape Town, told her husband that he should employ me, and it was a big bus company called Golden Harrow. So the corporate industry lasted in my blood for 6 months, and then the SPAR wholesaler in Port Elizabeth, who I got on well with, called Bruce McWilliams. He employed me up here. So I came here in 1969 to Port Elizabeth with my wife in a mini minor, a dog, and she was pregnant, so she wasn't very happy. So anyway, we came here, and I lasted with Bruce. We set it up, and we opened cash and carries all over South Africa, well, mainly the Free State and Cape and here. And we sold that business to the cash and carry group, Metro Cash and Carry, in 1974, and that's when I went on my own. And then I started off in swimming pools and then went to many other things. And in that business, construction and all the rest of it. And 1969, we had a very big job in Mossel Bay. And the guy who was building there went bankrupt. And that forced me into bankruptcy as well. So I lost everything in 1979. But where I'd signed personal surety, I made sure that I paid the people back because I believed the shake of the hand was better than a piece of paper. And I think one of the better things that I did. And anyway, we soon got back on our feet through swimming pools. And we did the first half Olympic night pool here, and then used to do them all over South Africa. And then we got into, in winter, there was not much work you could do in swimming pools. So we got into construction, and we built a big road in Tata. We built one in Lesotho. And then our business really got off the ground. And then Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as it was then, had its borders close to Mozambique. So they could export nothing through Mozambique. So they exported it through Port Elizabeth. So I quickly shot up there and made sure that we got the contracts of doing the iron, steel, asbestos, chrome, and everything through PE. And we opened a shipping business, and that really got me going. But then the interesting thing in those days was that if you farmed or had another business and you made a profit in the one, you could offset the loss of that other one in that business. And that was changed some 10 years after we started our horse stud in Plettenberg Bay. And I actually got Baron du Plessis, who was then the Minister of Finance, to come and open it. And we were very successful with our horse racing business. Everybody laughed at me and told me it would never work in Plettenberg Bay. It's the wrong place to breed horses. They have to be bred in the Karoo area. Anyway, we soon put a light to the candle there because I don't think it's been repeated. We had 8 Group 1 winners in 1 year. We had Horse of the Year, Filly of the Year, and Sprinter of the Year. And then towards the end of the 10 years that we're in it, and the law changed and everything, I was sitting in Zimbabwe, and I got a call to say, we've got a buyer for your farm. So I said, it's not for sale. So that was Thursday. I think I was back Thursday night. Said to my partner, I'll go down there. Nothing will happen. On Sunday, I'd sold it. And then we were left with a couple of hundred horses, which I then put into the public company that was owned by Sydney Press, who the founder of Edgar's, who had put a company on the stock exchange. So my horses went in there for me to have cash, ordinary shares, and preference shares. We soon turned that into a cash sale. We sold all the horses there. And then having had the cash, I thought to myself, I want my patch of Africa. So I sort of went back to Zimbabwe, believe it or not. I went to the traditional areas of South Africa, Sabi Sand and Northern Cape, to look for a game farm. Then I thought to myself, if I don't get something close here, I'm not going to enjoy it. And I was very lucky. I was sitting at a 50-50 game, cricket game, next to a guy called Arthur Rudman. And he said, there's a small farm for sale at Allisdale, near Allisdale, which is a little town outside Port Elizabeth, an hour's drive away. He said, go and have a look at it. It's only 1,200 hectares, but go and have a look at it. And I went and had a look at it. And, I was very surprised of what I saw so close. I've been living here for 20-odd years, and I didn't realize just how beautiful the landscape was outside Port Elizabeth. So we bought the first farm, and then the next one came up next to me. And the next thing, I had 3,000 hectares. And then I started to investigate what was in the Eastern Cape. And there are more species, or there were more species in the Eastern Cape than anywhere else in South Africa or Southern Africa. The variety here was more, but the 1820 settlers came in, and as you know, killed everything. They literally, 160 years ago, the lions were gone. There were 11 elephants left, which was the start of Elephant Park. And, there was the zebra, one that doesn't exist anymore. The quagga was wiped out. So they just cleaned it all up, and they changed the veld, and they started doing their cattle, sheep, and goats and things like that. And I looked at this, and then the next farm came. And then I thought, if we can put the game back here and the species, look, a lot of the land had changed because they had taken the bush out, and there was some grazing, which enabled us to put white rhino in. And then all my neighbors laughed at me and said, this guy's got more money than brains and all the rest of it. And actually, I didn't have that amount because I was spending too much. And I was the first from the IDC to get a tourism loan in the private tourism sector. And that was a total mess because, was told to pay interest and capital after a year, and it didn't work. And anyway, we got on well towards the end, and we worked it out, and they all obviously got paid back, and it became quite a success. So that was the sort of the beginning, and that started end of 89, 90, 92 we opened, and we obviously couldn't have free-ranging lions because we didn't have enough wildlife there. So we had to have lions in a separate enclosure. And then, but those days were so easy, you know, there was no Eastern Cape Park Sport. So all I had to do was, you know, would phone Cape Town and say, we're bringing some elephant. And they said, have you done the fences? So we said, yeah, I think they're okay. And they weren't okay because when we, because enough early days, you could only bring babies in because they're culled elephants in the Kruger. You couldn't get hold of the matriarch or the family. So anyway, we managed to bring a family in. We got found out that they'd done it in Zimbabwe. And we brought a family in with the matriarch. And she lasted in the boma 2 hours, banged it down through the fence down to the coast, killed cattle on the way, which were obviously prize cattle and everything, brought her back, she went out again. And the vet that I employed at the time, he was new in the game, said, we've only got one option, and so sadly we'll have to put her down. And we put her down, and then this elephant grew to an incredible herd that we've got there. And then we brought the lion, and that was another whole bloody disaster because I woke up on the plane, and the plane didn't take off properly, it was too much weight. And, you know, again, we have the right fences, you know, but now when I try and get a permit to do something at Noisy, it's just incredible what you've got to go through. And but I suppose it's because, you know, the success of Shamwari is that, you know, Ron, that there are 16 equivalents now. You know, the people have changed their cattle and sheep and all the rest of it and put farms together. And it's still not a destination.
Just to come in there, so it was a hell of a journey to get to Shamwari. And while you were talking, I was thinking, how is this going to lead to conservation? So, I mean, that was an entrepreneurial path with, it seems, a lot of challenges, but a lot of ups. And when you got to Shamwari and you started to grow it, what was the conservation landscape in the Eastern Cape? You were starting to talk about it, but if I can frame it that way, because we know of a number of reserves now, but what did conservation look like in the Eastern Cape at that stage when you were starting up Shamwari?
I wish I could show you a picture. It was in front of Longley, which was our first lodge, was red brown soil that had been plowed up, acres and acres of it, because they used to irrigate from the Bushman's River there. So I can remember it. What reminds me clearly of it, the top ranger, one of the top rangers at Mala Mala was John O'Brien. And I'm quite a good plagiarist. So obviously before I started, I went to look at what they did there, what Londolozi did, what Mala Mala did. And John was my ranger, and we got on very well. And he came down with his wife to look, and they got to the front gate, and his wife said, this is crazy, let's go. And anyway, they came in and had a coffee with me. And 35 years later, he's Dr. John O'Brien. He's the leading ecologist of the Eastern Cape, and he's really helped put the thing together. But the conservation side of it, Ron, was, I don't think it would have happened if I hadn't met, and I chased him because I knew that I needed endorsements. And I got him to come to look at what I was doing. It was Dr. Ian Player. And, you know, when he looked at it, he said to me, Adrian, this is an uphill battle, but you've got to do it because we've got to change this disgusting landscape that has been abused. It's dehydrated, it's abused. We've got to change this into this, and we can put back the species that were here. So keep going, and I will support you wherever I can, which he did by bringing incredible people to the game reserve. So he really was my conservation guru.
And were there other game reserves? I mean, what was there? Was the Addo there? Were Karichas and the Lalibelas, and what was there when Shamwari got started?
Well, it's a very interesting question that, because Karicha started by, they were building houses with a few game along a riverbank. And Colin Rushmere, the father of the Rushmeres there, and I went together. Then I showed him what I was going to do at Shamwari and put the big 5 back. So he sort of was an inspiration to me. So we together were the first. The others all followed. Obviously, there was Addo at an Elephant Park, which by that stage probably had a couple of hundred. You know, we couldn't buy elephants from them. We had to go to the Kruger to get our elephant. So they just, and this is where I've got a major issue with them at the moment, is because they followed us and they've got the big five. And they keep on referring to themselves as Addo Elephant National Park instead of Addo National Park. You know, cut out the elephant, because people from overseas think you only go there to see elephant. And I can't get them to think, and you know, we need a national park in the Eastern Cape. Just like when they dropped the fence at the Sabi Sand, between the Sabi Sand and the Kruger, a lot of those lodges say they're in the Kruger now. You know, we would like to say we're next to or adjacent to a national park. Why must we refer to elephant all the time? Because the people that read about it think that they've got to go there to see elephant, and they can see black rhino, everything there.
Well, I think you've won many battles, so we'll watch out for that branding while that battle is on. Adrian, was there a moment when you knew Shamwari would be a success, or that a vision started to unfold toward the future? I'm guessing there were a number of key moments, but was there a general time when you thought, okay, not only is this going to work, I'm going to do more?
I tell you exactly, it's a good question. Exactly what happened is that the minute that we released the lines, and you obviously know Mango Groove well, and I met them by chance. I met Claire on the aeroplane, and we talked about it, and they knew nothing about conservation. And I said, listen, you got to learn. And they went to see Dr. Player. And then when we released the lines in Shamwari into the wild, they came down and they were part of the thing there, and they sang obviously that famous song, Where the Lions Sleep Tonight. And so when it became a success was when we could go out to the market to say we have this big five free roaming on this beautiful landscape, which it was then, because we gave it quite a few years to rehabilitate. And fortunately, after I bought them, they'd gone through a 7-year drought, we had some good rains and the landscape came back quicker. And we're buying more and more farms, to the stage where we got up to about 18,000 hectares. And then I'll give you the reasons later why we got involved with Dubai World and then with Accor, because I think they are interesting parts of the journey. But as to answer your question, when it became a success, when we could go out to the public and say to them, we've got the big five, because that enabled us then to bring famous people to the reserve. And as you know, we've had some really famous ones. The guy, Tiger Woods, probably did me the biggest favor of my life when he blamed me for everything about his engagement. And he crashed our website and everything else. And we ended that story quickly by when his manager phoned me, I said to him, listen, he's in the water, I'm in the bunker. There's no winner here. Can we cut all this shit out and take it off the website and everything else? And then that sort of, but he gave us a lot of publicity. And then obviously we had Brad Pitt there, we had John Travolta there, and they all allowed us to give them, a credit for being there. So that really started putting us on the map.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one. I think a lot of people watching this live or afterwards, after watching the recording, know that the who's who of the world come, and I'm sure many have sort of graced your corridors there. And thanks for telling us about some of them. The Tiger Woods one is famous. Adrian, tell us, so you went from a reserve to a brand. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you formed Mantis around 2000. You can correct me. Did you see a gap in hospitality and conservation? What was it that took you from a reserve to a brand?
Very good question, Ron, is that we'd obviously been approached by the brands out there, Relais, Chateau, etc., and all the rest of it, because and then, we were starting to develop, in the year 2000, we had 5 properties that we were involved with. And I bet probably very few of you know that we opened the Saxon. Okay, so that was one of the first ones. And that was an interesting story because it was with the owner, Doe Steyn, who was diabetic, and he used to stay up till 2 at night and get up at lunchtime because he was scared of being asleep while he had his diabetes. And I went there and we had a drink and I watched a couple of the films that he had done. He was very anti-apartheid. And anyway, just a short story is that during the night while we're walking around, we're sitting down having a drink, he says, what do you think you're going to do with this place? I've said, I've got no bloody idea. Whoever's told you they've got something, there's nothing like it in the country, so I've got no idea what we're going to do with it. I said, you're the only one that's been truthful, you got the job. So we had the Saxon, we at that stage had Steenberg, we owned Steenberg, which was, the winery and the hotel. We had Lake Pleasant on the Garden Route, and we had Halliards in Shamwari. I think there were 5 of them, maybe the one in Zimbabwe. And I needed a brand. And Ian Player was actually staying with me at my home. And I said to him that night, Ian, I need a brand. Help me. So he went to bed, he came to breakfast. He said, you achieved 2 things. You kept me awake all night, and I've got your name. And I said, oh, that's it. What are you going to call? He said, I'm going to suggest you call it the Mantis Collection. And he gave me the background of that, is that, him and his mentor, Nkubu Ntumbela, when they walked around and they did, most of the Natal parks and everything, they were never frightened of a lion, elephant, any of those, because they could see and hear it. But there was always a very obviously the praying mantis. Then he saw of Sir Lawrence van der Post, which he kindly introduced me to after we got the name. And Sir Lawrence van der Post, as you know, was very involved in the Bushmen in Botswana. And he got very involved. The Bushman was a hunter-gatherer. And they would go from place to place. But wherever they went, there would be a praying mantis looking over it. So they called it the Hottentot's God. And he said, because you allow your general managers to look after your properties and they spread out and everything, call it the Mantis Collection. I thought that was very appropriate. And then we came up with the acronym after that, man and nature together is sustainable. And Paul will tell you a bit about it, but we grew that brand to almost 80 properties around the world, and the only hospitality brand in the world on all 7 continents, because we had Antarctica. And then I'll tell you why just now, how, why we needed other things with it.
Well, thanks, Adrian. I think it's a good time.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, should I just pick
I
up
wanted
on
to bring you in now, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just quickly for everyone before you let us know, I think for those who don't know, you're Adrian's son, and I'd asked you if you were still the CEO. You said MD of the Mantis Group, and you had also told me that you're actually moving back to South Africa after 23 years out of the country, and which is, I think, fantastic news. I think a lot of us listening love to hear of people coming back and leaning into a brighter future for South Africa. So, just listening to your dad speaking, there's a lot of partnerships and brands. And on the Mantis side, can you tell us a bit about what you wanted to say and also your journey to where you are now as the MD of Mantis?
Sure, and I'll correct you there. I'm just a board member on Mantis nowadays.
Okay.
But
Tell us more.
In the earlier days, I was a sort of chief marketing officer, and we'd obviously established the brand. And I remember somebody standing up in a meeting saying, you guys have got obviously Steenberg, and you've got wine and Table Mountain and whatever else. That's a bucket list. And then they said you've got the big 5 in the Eastern Cape. That's bucket list. And then we had Sanbona Wildlife Reserve in the Western Cape with white lions. That's bucket list. And then at that stage, we had sold about 70% of Shamwari and our game reserves to Dubai World. And they were on a shopping spree across Africa looking at other things. And they had a lodge up in Rwanda. And of course, you could go and experience the gorillas. So that was bucket list. So this guy said, you guys are so much of a bucket list collection. And that's kind of where the penny dropped. And we had quite a big office in London next to our little hotel there in Chelsea. And we said to the team, perhaps we should go on a bit of a look and see, because, we've got all these amazing lodges across Africa, but, they're beautiful properties and lodges in Argentina, Chile, Patagonia, you go to Peru, and then in North America, you've got the typical cowboy ranches and dude ranches, as they call them. And there's some beautiful ones and beautiful national parks where all these private lodges have popped up. And then Canada. And before we knew it, we had identified a portfolio of about 80 properties that joined Mantis while we were building the brand. So that was pretty cool, because, as Dad said, the missing piece was Antarctica, and I had some friends in Cape Town that had just established a beautiful camp called White Desert, and we said, could we bring you into our collection? And that gave us the status of being the only hotel group on all 7 continents, and nobody else has ever achieved that again. What happened was there was a bit of a pitfall with that, because we didn't manage those properties. We had a marketing arrangement for those properties, but because we didn't have a global distribution system, a loyalty program, it kind of fell flat, because you could never determine how much business you were selling them through the pipe. And so you'd have lots of money lodges around the world saying, hang on, you guys aren't delivering, whatever else. So slowly it was dismantled, and but the next part of that story is when we were approached by the big French company called Accor.
Now, let me go back one step there. I think to add to what Paul said is, to answer the question, why did we sell to Dubai World at the stage? You'll remember they bought into the waterfront. Had 50% of the waterfront, and they then the big boss came to stay with us, and he stayed at my house, which is Founders Lodge now, and he said, look, we need to buy a percentage of this game reserve, because, as Paul said, we want to use it in Rwanda. We've got property in in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Senegal. So we want to replicate what this guy's done. So I want him to take it and do it all over Africa. And then, as you know, 2008 came. And I'd got my check in April 2008 for 70% of the business, which was Senbona Jock and Jock Safari Lodge in the Kruger, and obviously Shamwari. And I've had a management contract for 3 years. And after 3 years, they could take my share out. They could buy me out at the original price, or there was an incentive as well. But then obviously no incentive because of 2008. Anyway, they brought a consultant in from London, and he came and chatted to me, looked at the place, looked at them all, and said, I don't know what I'm doing. Take him out. So they took me out and had to give me my 30%. And then they said to me, well, we're not going to give you all your money, because we're going to give you a house at Pearl Valley as part of your payment. It was a director's house, which was the only house in Pearl Valley that wasn't geared to the bank, because they geared Pearl Valley when they bought it 100% to the bank, and they sent that money overseas, and they bought a golf course over there. And anyway, they put it into business rescue or liquidation there. And the bank then got hold of me and said to me, would I build a hotel there? So we said yes, and I bought the hotel site. And then they said, no, now we've got a problem. The bank has told us to sell the whole thing. So you've got to buy the whole thing. So I said, okay, I'll put a few guys together, we'll buy it. Then they came back and said, no, one of my other guys had offered it to Val de Vie. So we did a joint venture with Val de Vie. And we were in that thing for 10 or 12 years together, made a huge success of it, and then sold it 6 months ago to a Filipino. But so the idea of selling to Dubai World was to take our model, which had been a great success, through Africa. And one of the things that happened, which is quite important, is that my Founders Lodge is on 400 hectares. And long before I sold to them, I had registered traversing rights over Shamwari, my trust had. And it was fully disclosed to them in a document, attached to the document, and I've marked it in red on the map. And I said to them, that's not for sale. And they said, well, then there's no deal. So my lawyer at the time, Keith, said nearly, he went white. And then so I said, okay, we can do a deal. If you take me out, we will pay you out the 30% and give you your money for your farm, which I put a value on. So anyway, the 3 years campaign me out, and they said, as I said to you, they're not giving me all the money that they got me to Pearl Valley. But I said, now, regarding my lodge, what do you want to do with that? Because, you know, you've got an option to buy it. We said, you can stick it up here or whatever. We don't want it. And they obviously didn't look at the papers attached to anything. And they reminded me that we got a 3-year restraint. So I said, no, I understand that. So that favor they did me was because that was the start of the Zambezi Queen collection. You know, we've got all our boats up. I had to work through Namibia because it was out of South Africa. So that got me into the Zambezi Queen collection. Then after the 3 years, I came back and I got out of Dubai World. And I said to them, good morning, I'm back. I'm coming to do you a favor. I've done a deal with the Radisson Group and we're building 200 rooms and 50 vehicles are going to traverse now, which obviously raised a huge flag. And then they got one hell of a spurt. And they realized that they hadn't read the document. And he tried to blame me for hiding it. Meanwhile, it was fully disclosed. So that's why we then decided to open Founders Lodge. It's a very unique lodge. It's got certain things on it, which we talk about later, a carriage and a hide. A hide that's, you walk out of your room and look in. You don't have to get in a vehicle and go to the hide. And and then we've got the traversing rights over Shamwari. So that's where it all began. And we've got a museum there with the history of wildlife in the Eastern Cape. So that's how that happened. Then, as Paul said, the next deal, 2018 came, and they took our top guy, Accor, took Craig Erasmus, was heading our development division, and they took him. They employed him, so we absorbed that division into our company here because they own half of it. And you know what we decided to do was just carry on. And then a year later, Craig came to us, or 2018, with his whole team, and they said they want to buy 50% of the Mantis Group because they love the brand, what we stand for, the conservation, all the properties we got. And we did it for 3 reasons. The reasons being, as Paul said, we didn't have a distribution system, we didn't have a loyalty program, and the third and most important thing, Ian Player said to me, Adrian, unless you involve communities in your conservation work, conservation is dead. So we opened the CCFA, the Community Conservation Fund Africa, which could be America, Australia, Asia, Antarctic, virtually everything in the world. And we said to Accor at the time, is the way we could make this work, how many people in your loyalty program? And they said, I don't know, 80 to 100 million. I said, can we ask them for $1 a person when they join? Or can we ask them for $1 worth of points towards a project? And sadly then, as you know, COVID came and that thing fell under the bus and we've just revived it now. And I'll tell you later what happened to CCFA and how I managed to bring Global Humane into Africa. But that's sort of the background of why I sold to 2 different people. Dubai World was a reason we were going to Africa, and Accor was a very big reason we needed those programs.
Well, I think just, Adrian, thanks. I mean, it's overwhelming to digest it all. And the word that just coming out with me is partnerships. You've really managed partnerships. And I want to come back to that. Just quickly to touch in with Paul. Paul, I think you started as a ranger at Shamwari, if my research is correct, but you can correct me. And, you know, living, working with your dad, a family business. I know there's Murray who's got Gilt Edge, if I'm not mistaken, but for your journey with your dad and within the group, you know, I'd like you to tell us a bit about that before I go back to your dad with some more questions. And also to tie in, I remember when I was going to Founders and somebody said a bar grill. I thought they were talking about a bar grill. And they were like, no, Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls. There's a Bear Grylls program running here. So, Paul, could you tell us a bit about, did you start as a ranger, the journey with your dad, and the Bear Grylls connection?
Oh yeah, thanks, Ron. It is a true fact. I started as a ranger, and you can believe in the 1990s there were, I don't think FOGASA even existed. You know, that's the Field Guides Association of Southern Africa, where you'd go and get your license. I actually had to go and do a professional hunter's license, which kind of gave me some credit towards becoming a ranger. And then John O'Brien, who Dad spoke about, gave myself and a good couple of my pals a crash course in game ranging. Oh, I mean, we had to make up birds' names and things like that. It was like just too much to know, not really having grown up in the bush. Anyway, we had a lot of fun doing that. It was the early days of Shamwari, so you could probably get away with it. It's obviously incredibly professional today. But that was where I sort of became very passionate about conservation. And you know, as a kid growing up, sure, we'd go on the odd hunting trip here and there with Dad, but it really became more entrenched through those game ranging days. And then Dad said to me, listen, our biggest market is coming out of Greater London and Greater London. And please go over there. We would like a family member to represent us. And I didn't really want to go to London, but I said, okay, I'll go for a year. And it's been 23 years. So it's been, you know, I kind of started to really enjoy it over there. And the opportunity in London throughout those decades was just amazing because you just meet so many fascinating people. And so I sunk deep roots into the country. But I was very fortunate. What made it a lot easier to live there was to be able to go backwards and forwards a lot. I think I was doing up to 5 or 6 trips a year back to South Africa. So yeah, it made those tough winters a lot easier to deal with. But as you rightly asked, I mean, we set up during my time there, we set up a student travel business because we realized the opportunity there. Lots of parents would come out to Shamwari, and particularly the British families, and they'd say, well, listen, our little Johnny is coming of age. He wants to do a gap year. And so we created a brand called Worldwide Experience, and we started sending lots and lots of students out to Shamwari where they'd work behind the scenes with the wildlife department, and they'd get a real kick out of coming out there for 1 or 2 months. And I think at its peak, we were probably accepting about 100 students a month, and they'd pay for the privilege of coming to chop down exotic trees and fix dongas and erosion. But then there'd be lots of fun stuff. They'd, you know, go with the vet to dart animals and do that. Program still runs today. And then I established another business with the legendary wildlife vet, Dr. William Foles, and he has a program called Vets Go Wild, which we started together, and we essentially take 3rd or 4th year students that need to do extramural studies as part of their course. And they can either go work at a local vet in England, or they can come out for 2 weeks with Will Foles and do some really cool stuff. And I think we probably attract about 100 students from around the world annually today. And then, as you asked about Bear Grylls, you know, he's the survivalist, the adventurer, the TV personality. And I always wanted to get to him, but everyone said, no, impossible. You know what these celebrities are like, blah, blah, blah. And then by chance, I met him at a fundraiser, and we were talking about rhino conservation. The plight of the rhino had just started to kick off in South Africa. And then I said, listen, Bear, how about setting up with, in conjunction with our gap year student program in South Africa, a survival school? And he said, absolutely, but you're not just taking it to Africa, you've got to take this thing around the world. And so we established the Bear Grylls Survival Academy about 12 years ago, and we are now in Australia, we're in China, we're in 3 different countries in the Middle East, obviously the UK where Bear is from originally, and India, and a couple of other places. We're actually going to open our first ever experience in Antarctica with some new partners there called Ultima Antarctic Expeditions, a new company that's just arrived on the scene. They do all the logistics, and they've built a camp there, so that's going to be pretty cool. So we had a lot of fun with the Bear Grylls brand over the years, and yeah, we hope to continue with that. We've got if you come to Founders Lodge today, you can actually, you know, while the parents relax up at the lodge, we take the kids down into the valley, and one of our rangers, or a couple of the rangers, are trained in the art of survival Bear Grylls style, and they're lighting fires and building shelters and getting caked in mud and doing all the stuff that we grew up with. And trying to get them off their devices today is a mission. So that's how we do it there, and it's a great experience.
Is there age range for people who want to know, they want to take their kids to partake? What kind of ages of kids do that at Founders?
At Founders, it tends to be the young kids. So I'd say from as young as 4 years old up to sort of 11, 12. If we get an inquiry for a bespoke event, which we often do, then we bring in the big guns. We'll bring in our instructors from overseas, and if somebody's willing to pay a healthy check, he'll make an appearance. He demands a big fee today, and we're doing one in the Caribbean this year. We're going to do for a private client. So we do these things all over the world, and they occasionally pop up. Those are the super cool ones when you bring in the helicopters and the ribs and all the gadgets.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because I'll come to you now, Adrian, just to finish off on Paul's side quick. It seems you've got your dad's knack for partnerships. I mean, I'm hearing from Tiger Woods to Brad Pitt to Bear Grylls to lodge names and Accor, and obviously a lot went in between there. So there's a Maverick, there's a Magic there. I'll go back to your dad. I want to move toward the corridor, but Adrian, will you? Sorry, I interrupted you there. You wanted to say something.
No, what I wanted to say, which I should have said at the beginning, is how did Gilt Edge come about? It was very interesting because when we were ready to go at Shamwari, I said, phone Rennie's, tell him we're open. I had no idea there was a tour operator involved. And then I woke up quite quickly and I went overseas, and then I found out that the way to do it was through tour operators, and I did an arrangement with a guy who had just started South Africa, had been working for another company. And then I got Murray, Paul's brother, my son, to come, and he started Gilt Edge from a room at our home and in Port Elizabeth. And then he moved it to Cape Town, and he managed to find a guy called Sean Kritzinger, who had been working for a travel company for many years. And, they've turned it into an incredible organization. I mean, Gilt Edge at the top end of the business is, I wonder why I went into any other business. I mean, when I see what they managed to make with small assets, but they've obviously you can only make money out of that thing with good people. So that's been an incredibly big part of our business. Although, I keep on moaning at him that we don't get enough from him. But in those days, in the early days, it was considered a thing to be associated, a product to be associated with a travel company. You had to be independent. Now that most of the big lodges have all got their own inbounds or whatever it is. So it's amazing how we were part of the wheel that started that as well, because we were one of the first. And even when we did the deal with Accor, we didn't go out publicly to say, Gilt Edge is part of us. We were still a bit skeptical, but it's now very vocal that everybody knows that, if you've got a tour operating company attached to your lodge, it's the right thing to do, or your group.
Yeah, well, I want to line up David Ryan, Rhino Africa, and I'll line up Murray as well, because I really think of Gilt Edge as one of the most substantial inbound operators. So that is a fascinating piece of info for us to know the connection. I want to move back in. I wanted to ask about the corridor. This is moving down to the Eastern Cape in 2020 myself. This is something I keep hearing about. It's almost this mythical thing to me. What is the corridor, and what is your involvement? I don't know who can field that one for me.
Well, I think to give you a background about it is that, first of all, you obviously know Andrew Muir and the Wilderness Foundation. Okay, so in the early days, and I'm going back a long time now, Dr. Ian Player asked me to join his board of the Wilderness Foundation, and his head office was in Natal in Durban. And I went to the meetings there, and there were only conservationists on, no business people. And they'd recently lost R1 million that they invested with some trust company who stole it. So, it was hard times. And then I looked at the work he was doing, and I said to Ian, the day you die, unfortunately, the Wilderness Foundation dies. So he said, why is that, Adrian? So I said, because Ian Player is bigger than the Wilderness Foundation. I want to make the Wilderness Foundation a legacy of yours, but I have to get the brand there. So he said, well, how do you think you're going to do that? So I said, I want to move it to the Eastern Cape, to Port Elizabeth. I want the foundation head office to be in Port Elizabeth. So he thought about it and he said, that's a good idea. But I said, one of the conditions is that can you convince Andrew Muir to come with it? Because he was then heading the Wilderness Leadership School, and I need him to come here. So it was very early days. So to bring it here, we needed about 800,000 Rand to get it going. And I'm talking now 25 years ago or more. And, at that stage, Enoch Ngwana and Mkhize Jonas were the Eastern Cape people. Enoch was the finance minister for the province. And I asked him, I said, Enoch, this is what we want to do. I'm going to need 600 to 800,000. And he came and he met Ian. And the next day he said, you got the check. So we could move it. So those days decisions were made. And it was probably one of the best decisions that was ever made, is to bring that foundation here. Because, I think we all need to give Andrew a tremendous amount of credit for what he's done. It's today probably the third biggest foundation in South Africa, and it does a hell of a lot of good work. So the corridor started with, obviously, he started a thing called Indalo, where all the game reserves get together and try and work out, strategic operational plans and that sort of thing. And then it's gone a bit further, where they actually bought a piece of land, and they've employed Peter Chadwick, who's running this thing to put it together. And then I'll go back a step there, because this is quite important, is that when the CCFA was struggling and we weren't getting any real money out of the loyalty program, that sort of thing, I was really lucky because Ian introduced me to SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. And I got to know the top people there very well. And then they gave to the Wilderness Foundation anything between $20,000 and $50,000 a year for community work. And then one of the top guys, when they restructured, after the orca whale and the blackfish that they went through so badly, and they need to get what they call certification. So they went to an organization called American Humane, who certified it, and they now certify films with animals in. They certify those sort of things, the zoos and that sort of. So then he said, it's about time that American Humane got involved in proper wildlife. Would you please go and visit Adrian at Mantis? So they sent out the MD, Robin Gansett, a wonderful lady, and the whole team came out, and they had a look at what we were doing, and they certified 4 of our properties. So that was the start of our American Humane coming here. Then I got them, I said, you need to open your own non-profit in South Africa. So I said, you can take over the CCFA with my board's permission, and we all agreed that that would be him. But what they did was they formed their own association, and they absorbed what we were doing with the CCFA, and they do the projects that when we give them money that we want them to and have their name on. So that was, they then, their guy that introduced them here had to give the American government a substantial amount of dollars, which he'd be taxed on, or if he gave it to a non-profit, he wouldn't be taxed. So he said, I'm giving it to you. They created American Global Humane Africa. I want to give it to Global Humane Africa, and I want you to buy some land, because I've heard about this corridor. So they bought a small piece of land right next to a piece of land that the Wilderness Foundation have bought. And so obviously discussions are going on now. But the ones who are really close together are Conry, Shamwari, Lalibela, Amakala, and we're talking, and obviously all of these that are talking to see. And if we can get it right, and unfortunately it won't happen in my lifetime, but there's a whole plan, and I've seen the plan with all of the farms, who owns them and everything, virtually from Plettenberg Bay to Graaff-Reinet, which will then become twice the size of Kruger. And it's possible for it to happen. So, and that's all because of the fact that, we've managed to get the Wilderness Foundation here and the work that they do, and they work with the government. And this is a part that I don't want to forget to discuss you, but do you want to come back to it later about Noisy?
Well, I want to just, if you can quickly, because I see we're very limited on time and there's still so long to go, with so many questions, but could you just briefly tell people listening what the CCFA is?
Well, the CCFA is the Community Conservation Fund Africa. And the funds that we raised there was to educate the community in wildlife. And what we do is that we've got this place called Noisy, which is a game reserve between two cities. So we don't go and talk about Hyde Park or Central Park or any of that. I think we've got a game park, the first in the world between two cities, 3,000 hectares. And what do we do there? We rewild animals. So we're rewilding cheetahs at the moment, and very successfully. But at the same time, when we do any of that rewilding or anything that goes on there, the community next to us is called Kwanabushle. So we get communities involved. We have a big golf tournament that's run by Nedbank every year. A guy called Jeff Johnson runs it. All those funds go into community education programs, which is run now by a Global Humane. So they're very involved in where they can be to try and educate the communities that they will. And we, I just can't put rhino there. It's really bugging me at Noisy. And, I was very privileged to name a gorilla. The person that was with me was Mandela's wife, Russia. And, in those days, I think we named then about 15. I see they're naming 44 this year. And, you get to name a gorilla, and it's a very special thing. So I thought, can't we get something like that going for the community in Noisy to name a rhino? And they can adopt that rhino, and whatever proceeds we get by moving it, give that money to the community. So we're working on different programs there. But I want to come back to that about the lines that we're trying to do and why at Noisy. But
tell us now, Adrian.
Okay, but the Community Conservation Fund is educating communities to the benefit of why wildlife can benefit them. And I want to give you a statistic quickly so you understand, is that when we bought all those farms that make up Shamwari, there were about 12 of them, and they were lucky if there were 14 people employed. There's only one farm was occupied. The rest were absentee farmers who just had their cattle and sheep there. They wouldn't be around there today with the poaching that's going on. But the other day we did our numbers between farmers and Shamwari. We employ nearly 500 people. That's without the multiplier effect of car hire, air tickets, booze, food, everything else. So it just shows you the effect. So what we're trying to show the community is what can happen if they do get involved and we make the reserve a success of how many people that can be employed on the reserve or next to the reserve and supplying the reserve or whatever the case may be. In fact, we've donated some of our land at Noisy where they can grow vegetables and things and supply us. But this tragedy that we have in South Africa, and you've probably heard of it. How many lions do you think there are in captivity? Well, Colin told us that. Colin said it's something between 10 and 12,000. But those are for bones and for hunting. Okay? And there's about 2,000 in the wild. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to create a safe haven at Noisy. It's only going to be 16 to 20 hectares to show people what should not be done. So we will take some of these lions that are either going to be euthanized if they pass the law or whatever the case may be, and open these safe havens where you can't breed from them, but you can at least tell people why they shouldn't be in captivity and used for what they're using. So it's a big program of ours, and it's taken me now, if I had to tell you the frustration I'm going through to get that permit after everybody, the ministerial task team's been, the minister knows about it, and do you think I can just get the final signature to say, go ahead? It's just so frustrating because that will give me the lines at Noisy. The only thing that we won't have there then will be the rhino, but we'll work out a way that we can do it. And it's getting very popular.
With limited time left, the few things that I wanted to ask you that I'd like to still ask now is, what is the most exciting project for you at Mantis right now? What does the future look like? You mentioned Noisy. It seems that is what's on the cards now. It's a reserve right on Port Elizabeth or Quebec's doorstep? Is that the main focus at the moment?
No, I think, we've learned a lot over the last few years. And I must give Accor the credit for this with Craig and his team, is that we've come up with three ways in which you can use the Mantis brand. There's a full management contract, and we've got them to reduce that from, a normal 400 hotel to, our small things. There's a management contract. Then we have a franchise agreement, which we can use their name and we can use the loyalty program and whatever, but we don't manage. And then we have a badge. And the badge being that you can have the Mantis brand on it, but you have to follow certain ethics, and we have to so-called pass your lodge or your hotel or whatever the case may be. So that to me is that I want to grow the brand, because I just think that the brand stands for so many things that a lot of people in the hospitality industry don't do. So we're very clear in what should happen at a hotel. We're trying to avoid any plastic whatsoever. We do a lot of the things that aren't being done in the industry, and I really want to see that through. That we get that, then we'll get back to being on all the continents, because then we won't be charging a big management fee. We'll give you a badge, but you will have to run the property according to certain specifications which adhere to the Mantis brand. That to me is probably the most exciting, to see it grow rather than die. And, it's quite frustrating, and I say it quite openly and honestly. We try and get it done quickly, but when you're dealing with a corporate which has got thousands and thousands of hotels, 50 brands, it's not that easy. So we're trying to do it by showing them that this is special, this is unique. Please just let us get on with life. You're on mute.
I think we needed 2 hours, but I believe we can run till 11:15. I know quite a few people have dropped off. Just to say, if anyone has got a question, please ask in the chat box. We've got about 18 minutes before our Zoom has to end. Adrian and Paul, maybe coming back to you, is there continuity? Have you and your dad discussed? Are you running the ship afterwards? And it's quite a tough question to ask you, but is it the family business that you'll be taking over the reins, or can you tell us a bit about continuity within the Mantis Group?
Before he answers that, just let me tell you is that we've been very lucky in that, I have people like Devon, my PA, Lynn, and Ignis, and many others who've been with me for between 20 and 40 years. So, it's a family team, even if it's through time. So that's what I think Paul will inherit. But hopefully, the reason for him coming back here is that I can actually have a day off once a year.
Well, I think I got to see that at the book launch, which we haven't touched on yet, where, Adrian, you're known to be quite a firebrand and controversial to some. And I was standing in the room, and I don't know the controversy, to be honest, but some of your friends and guests and work family were alluding to as much as were you. And I just listened to how long people have been around for. I mean, 15, 20, longer years. So there's already a family business, a work family. So maybe Paul, coming back in there into your role in the future with the work family.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So coming back after 23 years is exciting. I think a lot of people are saying, why the hell are you coming back to sleepy Port Elizabeth? And it's got its issues, certainly. But I think one of the big things for us, and certainly my wife and I, because she's also from the Eastern Cape, and she's worked with the Wilderness Foundation, she still does. She's worked with the Quilisis and Sia and Rachel on their foundation. So she's got a lot to come back for. But we are super passionate about the corridors and supporting all the private and national setups that are wanting to make this happen. Because if we can get that right, you forget the Eastern Cape doesn't border with Mozambique, it doesn't border with Zimbabwe, and it doesn't have the populace that they have around those big parks. We sit here quite fortunate that you've got a lot of farmers that are really keen on learning more about the corridor initiative. And that's exciting. You don't have all these big barriers. We can grow and grow and grow. And so that's a big part of why we're coming back. We also obviously want to get closer to our folks as they get a little bit on in life. And then I think it is to a point taking over the reins. You know, Mantis is very much run by Accor now, so we have less day-to-day involvement with them. But there are certain things where we're actually dovetailing nicely together, and one of those is in development. So we, for a long time, have been developing boutique hotels and lodges. You know, we've been doing that for 30 years, and we had a development arm within Mantis, but when we sold to Accor, they said, listen, we don't do development. We're a management and marketing company. So you can keep that as long as you take the brand Mantis off it. So we said, that's fine. And we've created a brand now called Terra Nova Create. And that is exactly what we do. If somebody wants a boutique hotel, a game reserve, a lodge, an eco lodge, we've got 30 years of doing that. So we said, don't go and reinvent the wheel. Learn from us. We'll save you a lot of school fees. And as part of that, we do master planning. So, you know, we would look at the lodge, create your dream. We'll get our architects to do a very lightweight drawing of what you are envisioning. We will cost that up. We'll look at some benchmarking and, you know, what occupancies and rates are achieved around the type of lodge that you wanted to develop in the area, and we'll plug that into our model, and we'll churn out whether that's going to survive or fall flat, and probably save you a lot of money. But it's a cool little business, and we really wanted to escalate that because we've got so much experience at it. But we actually need to formalize that. So Terra Nova is quite young; it's a fledgling, although there's 30 years of legacy behind it. So we're propping all of that up now, and how we're going to prop that up is we've just launched a new brand. It's only about 2 weeks old. It's called the Eco Venturist, and it's a media brand essentially. And you'll know a bit about that space. But it's kind of a lead generator for us, but it's largely storytelling. So we're going to be doing a lot of what you're doing in terms of unearthing these exceptional eco stories, not just in Africa. We go around the world unearthing these stories, and we tell the stories in a fun way. We try and get out into the wild. I'm a runner, so I tend to do it on foot, and my lazy cameraman Christian comes with me, and he's half English, half Caribbean, so he loves his run. But the two of us have a lot of fun doing this. But on the run, I will meet amazing people, and we unearth their stories. And so it's quite a cool format that we've just rolled out now. We've just launched our first episode on Friday, actually, with an Australian celebrity who came out here to unearth our story and find out more about founders. And then you'll see, and that's just gone live on our Eco Venturist YouTube channel.
Oh, please put that on our groups as well. I mean, I believe I was at the ADO AGM, the tourism AGM, and what my recommendation was: sell the stories. You know, $9.99. It's not as much. Tell the story. Adrian was saying, name the rhino. Get us involved in the personal journey, because, you know, my belief with South Africa, and certainly this applies to the Eastern Cape, the only thing more beautiful than our scenery is our people. And it gets lost in the negativity. And we've got so many wonderful stories. And before I let you go on that one, and maybe a bit unorthodox to mention, but it'll lead to my next question. You know, I've just come back from Colin Bell's beautiful Gwegwe Beach Lodge. I predict it's going to be a huge success. It's going to combine with your Shamwaris, with your founders, with your Karikas, and with up into the Kruger, but another gem in the Eastern Cape. And I've told Colin, I think I mentioned it to Lisa Goosen and Warwick, and I'll tell it to you too. I think Kenton-on-Sea, those two beautiful rivers, that ocean, there's a piece of land there. And if somebody's watching this, I plant that seed. I think South Africa's best beach lodge needs to happen there, or could happen there. And I want to lead that across to, maybe in closing, from both of you. Adrian, what is the opportunity, maybe on the bigger picture for South Africa, but certainly the Eastern Cape? What do we need to move the needle forward for market share in the Eastern Cape and or South Africa from a tourism point of view?
Well, you've really, you've asked me a question that I'm on about all the time. Is that, first of all, I don't know who the hell we get hold of, but the airlift from Cape Town is diabolical. You know now that there's only one day a week you can get an early morning flight. Otherwise, you got to come in that midday flight, and you land at 2. By the time you got to the game reserve, any game reserve here, it's nearly dark. So you miss an afternoon game drive. So that is a total disaster as far as I'm concerned, is the airlift from Cape Town, because we found out in our research that we did that 90% of the first-time visitors to South Africa go to Cape Town. And, you know, we've got to tempt them into coming to the Eastern Cape. So what are the USPs of the Eastern Cape? First of all, the one that I got criticized on is that we are malaria-free. So when I was talking to Mike Rattray of Mala Mala about something, he said, I want to teach you a lesson in marketing. You don't advertise negatives. You must not say you're malaria-free. So I said, don't worry, Mike. If you want free malaria, they can come to you. So that shut that up quite quickly. So, you know, that is quite a big positive, you know, that we are malaria-free. Now, the next thing is to get us to become a proper destination. And I mentioned it briefly in the beginning, is please can we get Addo to drop the word elephant. Addo National Park. It's a national park. And, you know, Kruger National Park. We want a national park here. By saying we've got a national park here, obviously indicates that this is a wildlife area. So those are the 3 major points in my life to boost tourism to this part of the world. Fix up the bloody airlift, promote the fact that we're malaria-free, and promote the fact that we are part of a national park, that we have a very big national park here, and that our parks see more variety. And I can tell you that was confirmed, because I had Gary Player come and stayed with me a couple of months ago, and I said, Gary, you can come here, but there's one condition, is that we can do an interview with you and you can stay with me. So he said, that's easy, no problem. So I said, and I'd seen it that he's got a partner now. I said, are you bringing your partner? So he said, yes, he is. So I said, that's great. Tell me, has she done much of Africa? She said, I don't think she knows much about Africa. So, okay. So I was sitting with them at lunchtime, and she was next to me, and I said, tell me, your experiences in Africa, have you done much here? She said, I've done everything. I've done the migration, I've done the gorillas, I've done Botswana, I've done Sabi Sand. So now I'm really on the back foot, because they've been with us 24 hours at Founders. So I said, well, you know, I suppose this is just like a little trip for you. She said, let me tell you something. This is one of the best game experiences of all of them that I've been to. And the reason, because there are more species here than I've seen at any other park. And secondly, the environment where you can sit on a hill and look down and see elephant, you can see rhino, and you can see animals because of the landscape. She said it is incredible. You should be very proud of it. So we need ambassadors, Ron. We need people like you and whatever I can help with to tell people that this is a wildlife destination. We are a game part of Africa. But at the moment, do you agree with me? It's not, hasn't come through. People come here, the first thing on their mind is Kruger, Vic Falls, and Botswana. And we see it because our boats are packed. You know why? Because people are going to the Vic Falls, and then it's just an hour's drive, and they're on our boats, and then they can see all the wildlife in the Chobe.
Yeah, I think we need a joint marketing effort. We need to create that brand. Maybe it's the Addo Big Five, the Greater Addo Big Five reserves. But Paul, anything to add in terms of what you see for Eastern Cape or South Africa and Unlocker? We've got 6 minutes to go, and then I'll close with your dad.
So I'll always endorse our wildlife here, and I mean, it is a little bit fragmented. You see all these fenced off areas, but the corridors are going to be the next chapter, and that's what's going to be exciting. Also, remember, this is the home of Mandela. we often forget that, and nobody leverages that name and that brand. It's probably one of the biggest the country could ever have, and the Eastern Cape should be piggybacking off that. So I like your name, Addo, Greater Addo, but I would love to see the Greater Mandela Reserve. I think that would put us on the map in a far, far bigger way. But yeah, that's political. But you know what? My closing point is a great friend of mine who's had a concession, great friend of ours actually, Ian Hunter. He's got a 5,000 hectare concession in slap bang in the middle of Addo. And if you wanted to get a glimpse of what the future of wildlife is going to look like, go and stay at his camp. It's called Gora Elephant Camp, because we spent a couple of nights there under canvas, and I just couldn't believe the concentration of wildlife. He's got a watering hole. It's the only one in that valley, so they do it quite cleverly. But the black rhino that came to drink with their calves, the herds and herds of elephants that came by, the buffalo, and then falling asleep that night, the lions roaring, the spotted hyenas. I mean, it's as good as being up in the Delta. It is quite something. That, to me, is the shop front window for what the Eastern Cape's going to become. It's hell of a exciting. And
Paul, I couldn't agree more. Ian and I are good mates. That watering hole is something, he's got that little piece of rail protecting you, and he said it's psychological. I'm like, for who? But it's just so magic. And Angus left a comment saying, for Paul and Adrian, the ability to make a difference must apply, I suppose, a remark as much as a question. And he's been watching your eco ventures and travel quest. He's wishing you the best of luck. So that's from Angus. And what I wanted to end off on is to say to Adrian, how does a man come to own his own railway carriage, which is now an incredible experience that you can book at Founders? I can see you built swimming pools. That is one cool swimming pool. How the heck did you have your own railway carriage? Can you tell us briefly? We've got 3 minutes to close.
No, it's a very interesting story. I'm glad you asked it, because at the time that we had our shipping business and we're handling the stuff from Zimbabwe, the ports and the railways fell under one manager. And he was a great wildlife guy and also a rugby enthusiast. And he, being the manager of the area, the managers of Transnet or whatever it was called in those days, had their own private railway coach. So we used to go up to Kimberley in the coach, then down to Cape Town and watch rugby in our box and all the rest. And I said, now, why can't I have a coach? So he said, I can, I'll fix it for you. So he found the second class coach, which we brought down here, and there was still a coach, old coach people that maintained and did it, and I designed the inside, and they did it for me, and then I got the permission. I had a contract with the railways that I could hook onto any train that that would go to Joburg, but passenger trains that were going, when they were working well in those days. Go to Joburg or go to Cape Town. From Joburg, go into Indaba. I used to park it there. That was our office at Indaba, and then in front of our house in Cape Town. And then, railways also. Unfortunately, we had our crane business, and next door to the crane business was the railway line to Joburg. So I asked him if I could just could they shunt the crane to next to us there, and I got the cranes there, and we lifted it over, and it became a canteen at the office. Then we sold the crane business, but we owned the building, and they weren't using the carriage as a canteen as we were. So I said, do you mind if I take it? So we had the cranes and the thing. It was quite a job. We moved it there. You wouldn't believe it when you see it, how the hell you move a carriage that size there. And we did it because, in the Sabi Sand, you can go and sleep in a tent in a tree house. We can't do it in the Eastern Cape with the wind.
It's one of the coolest experiences. Book the railway carriage at Founders. Gents, thanks so much. We needed 2 hours. I greatly appreciate your time, and I hope the listeners at home enjoyed too. Thank you so much.
Mantis.
Mantis. Thank you, James.